than ever before.
For all of the comments that Joe Biden has made that have been bigoted, for all of the policies that Joe Biden has made that have really, really hurt the black community and set us back, Joe Biden needs to apologize and needs to stay in his basement.
But if you just take a step back for a second, think about the way that China, Russia, North Korea, Iran, all of our adversaries around the world are salivating, thinking that this guy is going to be the possible president of the United States.
What we would have is a systemic recession if it was a Joe Biden administration come November, because he would start implementing policies that we know are regressive in nature, that we know are not good for the economy. It would be about higher taxes and more regulation.
President Trump delivered the hottest economy on record that had to be artificially interrupted by the coronavirus. When we compare the work President Trump did to build that strong economic foundation with basement barely there Joe Biden.
Behind Biden is a machinery that is very dangerous, very progressive.
You want a leader, you want someone who stands up and tells it like it is, who tells the truth no matter what this group or that group or the media and some source or another might say. The only choice is Donald J. Trump.
We are one people, one family, and one glorious nation under God. We will make America great again.
Welcome to Team Trump Online.
Hello and welcome to another edition of Team Trump Online's War Room Weekly, where we take a closer look at President Trump's excellent record of achievement on behalf of the American people and contrast that with Joe Biden's record of dismal failure over nearly half a century in Washington, D.C. I'm Tim Murtaugh, the Communications Director for the Trump 2020 campaign. We're glad you're with us, and we are very happy to be joined today by former Acting Attorney General of the United States, Matt Whitaker. Matt, good to see you.
Hey, Tim. Good to be with you.
And the founder and president of the Article 3 Project and former chief counsel for nominations for the Senate Judiciary Committee, Mike Davis. Mike, glad to be with you today.
Thanks for having me, Tim.
So, as we all know, July 4th has just passed, the 244th birthday of this great country. And we will talk today about woke culture in the United States, what Democrats and the allies of Democrat candidate Joe Biden have to say about that and what they think. But first, as we're talking here, and as the Senate has just confirmed the 200th judicial nominee of President Trump's, and we've seen some recent court decisions on the Supreme Court, we know that the constitutional principles that we all enjoy and that we cherish, and the rights that we're all born with, rights endowed by God, not provided by the government, but in fact protected by the Constitution. Some of these recent Supreme Court decisions have left some conservatives feeling a little bit disappointed. So as we talk about judicial nominations going forward and in the context of this election, there are some really very important decisions that voters are going to have to be making, because the next president is very likely to be able to appoint one and maybe two Supreme Court justices. So, Mike, let's start with you. Why is that an important issue for voters to be thinking about?
Well, first, I would say that the president is doing a phenomenal job on his record-breaking transformation of the federal judiciary. President Trump campaigned in 2016 on the promise that he would appoint judges in the mold of Justice Scalia. And if you look at the 200 Article 3 judges that he's appointed, including Justice Gorsuch, Justice Kavanaugh, 53 judges to the critically important federal circuit courts, and all the other district court judges, he's delivered on his campaign promise from 2016. And I would say that if anyone is disappointed about any particular case, I think we need to step back and look at the bigger picture. justices may disappoint us from time to time, but you have to look at their overall record. And for the last nearly 4 years that President Trump has been in office, like I said, he's transformed the federal judiciary, and these judges are doing what President Trump campaigned on, and that is they are following the law instead of making it up. And it is an impressive record. It's something that conservatives should be very proud of. And I think President Trump should run on that record. It's one of his biggest accomplishments, if not his biggest accomplishment.
And so, Matt, this was a big issue in 2016, and voters paid attention, conservatives paid attention, and we think that it'll be a big issue again as we head forward to November of 2020. Your thoughts on why voters should pay attention to this?
Yeah, this is something that every year the courts and the federal judiciary become more important to our republic. It was never intended this way by our founding fathers. In fact, if you read their writings at the time of the Constitution, there was a suggestion that actually the courts would be the weakest branch of the three branches. But as Congress especially has laid down on so many of the divisive political issues that should be addressed by them and by their representation of the people, the courts have become more powerful. And so not only has President Trump appointed 200 judges to the federal judiciary, district, circuit, and Supreme Court, I think it's the type of candidates that they've put on the courts. They're just exceptional in their background and experience. Many of them I know personally or had some involvement at my time at DOJ as chief of staff and as acting attorney general. And Tim, I think it's so important that not only is the Supreme Court probably going to have 2 vacancies in the coming 4-year term, expectedly during President Trump's second term, his second 4 years. But I think, the circuit and district courts are so important to some of these less high profile but more important issues that affect American business and American individuals, whether it's religious liberty, whether it is the freedom to move around the country and conduct commerce. There are just so many issues that are addressed. And I know one of the places that gave me the most frustration at the Department of Justice was the Ninth Circuit. And I know we've put some judges on the Ninth Circuit, and if we could have an opportunity for another 4 years of rebalancing the Ninth Circuit, Tim, I think that could make a huge difference in accomplishing the president's priorities and ultimately making America a better, freer, and more independent place to live and work. And so I'm excited about President Trump's reelection and continuing to reshape the courts.
I think a lot of people do tend to focus naturally, of course, on Supreme Court picks. And if the president gets 2 in a second term, he will definitely leave a bigger mark on the Supreme Court. But all of the federal judiciary is so very important. You mentioned the Ninth Circuit and, of course, other circuits around the country and the federal courts in general. So fantastic remaking of the courts. Putting 200 good, solid conservatives on there. And let's remember, in 2016, President Trump released a list of names that he would consider when making his Supreme Court picks. And that won a lot of attention from conservatives. And he says he's going to do that again the second time around before the election in this November, release another list of names that he would consider for people to go on the United States Supreme Court. Joe Biden has not released such a list. And, I think conservatives have an idea of what kind of justices Joe Biden would be selecting. Mike, let's go back to you. Why should conservatives and regular Americans, everyday Americans, be concerned about who Joe Biden would put on the court if we were unlucky enough for him to become president?
Well, we might have 2 or more vacancies for the next 4 years, but we also have the Democrats who are campaigning on the issue of court packing. So if President Biden wins the presidency, there is a very good chance that the Democrats win the Senate. And if that happens, they will nuke the legislative filibuster. What that means is they will lower the vote threshold from 60 votes to 51 votes, and they will add seats to the Supreme Court. Joe Biden is not going to be able to control the liberal activists who will make him do this. And so you're going to see, if a President Biden wins, you're going to see packing the court, added seats to the Supreme Court, and then they're going to undo everything that the president has done to the lower courts. The president has flipped the 2nd, 3rd, and 11th circuits. What that means is when President Trump took office, there was a majority of Democrat-appointed judges on those circuits. Now there's a majority of Republican-appointed judges. And Matt talked about the 9th Circuit. When President Trump took office on this 29-seat, completely out of whack circuit, there was an 11-seat advantage for Democrats, meaning there were 11 more Democrat-appointed judges than Republican-appointed judges. President Trump has got that number down to just 3. In his 2nd term, he could do something that is unthinkable for a Republican president before President Trump, and that is flip the 9th Circuit. So there is this election is huge. It's going to be, do we want to pack the Supreme Court with liberals, liberal judicial activists who will just make up the law to fit their political ends? You could see the Democrats, if they nuke the legislative filibuster, they could do what they did during the Carter administration. They added around 150 seats to the lower courts. They could do that now and just completely undo everything that President Trump has done in the last 4 years. This election is critical on the issue of judges. The next president is going to, you guys say 2. I actually think it could be more than that. I think it could be 4 Supreme Court justices. So it is a critically important election.
Amazing. So as many as 4 Supreme Court justices, in your view, and
in addition to the court packing. In
addition to putting as many seats on the Supreme Court as they decide they would like to have, right? And so we're all familiar with, anybody who pays attention, of all the notoriously bad decisions that have come out of the 9th Circuit over the years. And so flipping that would be something that I think a lot of conservatives had been dreaming about for a long time, but never really thought possible. But in the 2nd term, President Donald J. Trump could actually achieve that. That would be amazing. Matt, when you think about the prospect of Joe Biden working with the extremists, and we know that he can't stand up to them on this or any other issue, packing the U.S. Supreme Court, and even if they didn't expand the court, being able to pick 2, 3, or 4 justices to solidify a liberal majority over there for a generation, and just the damage that he could do on the federal judiciary in general by either creating new seats or just packing it with liberal judges. What should voters be understanding about what rulings and what impact on actually people's actual lives a super liberal judiciary could have?
It makes me shiver to think, Tim, about what we would have in this liberal utopia that they have created in Nancy Pelosi's mind. And if Mike has a lot of experience in the Senate, and as he knows, Obamacare took 60 votes to pass, and we know what a tragic regulatory disaster Obamacare has been. It did not make healthcare more available and less expensive. It's done quite the opposite. And states have uniquely had to undo many of those through state legislation in order to make it work for their own citizens. And so if we get rid of the filibuster in the Senate for all bills, we will not only will things like Obamacare be commonplace, but really everything in Nancy Pelosi's fever dream that she has constructed, including, Tim, and this is something that I feel passionately about. And on Independence Day, I took a moment just to really appreciate and thank law enforcement for the job they do. They have been completely attacked unfairly for the horrendous acts of a few officers. And I just want to say that, if law enforcement and their qualified immunity, that doctrine could be out the window in a Nancy Pelosi led world with Joe Biden riding shotgun and signing every bill that they can pass and supported by the courts. I mean, if we lose the republic that we have counted on for so long, you will see American businesses start to fail. You will see entrepreneurs unwilling to take risk. You will see a world where kind of the things that we take for granted, our ability to go out in public and do the kind of things that we enjoy, those rights will be constantly infringed by the left and their wokeness so that we don't offend somebody. I could see a world, and I mean, again, this is wildly speculating, but I could see a world where things like flying an American flag could be viewed as an offensive act. And I think that world is not a world I want to live in. I want to proudly be an American. I want to be a patriot. I want to do my part in society, like we all should, to participate in civics and to make this a more perfect union. But it really starts with supporting the men and women in law enforcement and the hard work that they have to do when they run to the sound of guns, quite frankly, in our streets and in our cities. And we know that law and order and a country that is just, that is fair, but at the same time protects its citizens is what we want and what Donald Trump will deliver when he's reelected.
Yeah, and that's exactly right. And what we have seen across the country with the civil unrest and the pulling down of statues, and never mind the rioting and looting and burning of American cities, and in some cases in minority communities and Black-owned businesses being burned to the ground in a matter of hours after it took entire lifetimes to build these businesses, and just the lawlessness and what we see. And I'm afraid that Joe Biden cannot stand up to the rabid left wing of his party and the extremists who are insisting on defunding the police. We learned from AOC just the other day that she says, hey, when we say defund the police, we mean defund the police. We're not trying to be subtle here. And so these are the people who are aligned with Joe Biden and are his allies as he tries to become president of the United States. And so you mentioned the 4th of July, which just passed. We three here are very proud Americans, proudly display and cherish the American flag. And we also revere the holiday of July 4th, which, of course, commemorates our Declaration of Independence from England in 1776. But that kind of sentiment does not appear to be shared by Joe Biden's party. Let's take a look at a tweet from the official account of the Democratic National Committee. And this is a reference to President Trump's celebration of America on July 3rd, on Friday, at Mount Rushmore, referring to the event that he held at Mount Rushmore commemorating the 4th of July as holding a rally glorifying white supremacy. Now, they deleted that tweet, of course, but this is where Joe Biden's party is right now, and he hasn't said a word about that tweet or the sentiments that it conveyed. So, Mike, let's go back to you. What in the world does it say about the Democratic Party and Joe Biden that they would, one, tweet this, and that, number two, Joe Biden wouldn't say anything about it, to say that holding a July 4th celebration at Mount Rushmore glorifies white supremacy? What kind of world do they live in?
It's a crazy world, and this is the world we will all live in if President Biden, or if we have a President Biden and a Democrat Senate and a Democrat House. They will. We will not be able to stop them from pushing through every policy agenda, left-wing crazy policy agenda that they want to push through. DC statehood, defunding federal grants to law enforcement. I mean, it just never ends. Packing the Supreme Court, packing the lower courts. It would be disastrous for our country. Our country has been through a lot this year with the coronavirus and then these riots. And we can't keep doing this. We need a president. We need President Trump in that office because he's the one who's not going to bow to these woke mobs. He's going to stand up for law enforcement, stand up for everyday Americans, stand up for law and order. And I just can't imagine what our country would be like if President Trump is not here in January.
Yeah, let's be clear here. This isn't some random person on Twitter who said this, or some fringe extremist group with a Twitter handle saying this. This is the Democratic Party, the DNC, the people who are nominating Joe Biden to be their candidate for president. And Matt, when you see that, when you say that a July 4th celebration at Mount Rushmore is to glorify white supremacy, and Joe Biden stands there so weak, what comes to mind for you?
Well, Joe Biden is weak and can't stand up to the base of his party. I mean, it is we are the Democrats' base right now appears to be woke snowflakes who are so offended by the history of America that they want to erase it. And we don't have to look very far to look at other countries where leaders and parties try to erase their history, and it is not good. We can accept that America was not perfect at its founding. America was not perfect before the Civil War. And you know what? Quite frankly, we continue to try to perfect this system of a constitutional republic, and everyone has a role. But when the DNC tweets out something like this, it is so beyond the pale of what is really going on. President Trump is celebrating what's good and right about America, what's good and right about our history. And, you know, I look at Mount Rushmore, and I've been there several times. It's in the Midwest where I'm from, and where Mike's from, in fact, too. And, you know, I see someone like Abraham Lincoln, who is an absolutely, you know, sort of probably, if not the greatest president ever, one of the greatest presidents ever. And Abraham Lincoln obviously was like every human being, was not perfect, but he brought about the abolition of slavery. He won the Civil War, and he restored the Union. And, you know, that moment in American history is so important. And his, you know, he being on Mount Rushmore is so symbolic of American greatness. And this is one of the things that really, the contrast in this election couldn't be starker. Joe Biden doesn't want America to be great. He does not want America to be a superpower. The left and Democrats, they've said it before, they said it with Obama, Biden for 8 years, is that we are just one nation among all of the nations on the globe. That is not true. America is a beacon of freedom. It is a beacon of opportunity. It is the greatest idea ever conceived. And this is not, you know, we sit here in the United States, we celebrate the 4th of July. I'm not sure a lot of Americans fully appreciate how unique our experience is throughout the course of human history and throughout the course of the existence of human beings on the planet Earth. This is such a unique experience to have individual liberty, individual freedoms, to have a representative republic where we elect people to do our business, and the power comes from the people and not vice versa, that the government is responsive to us. And we have to also remember that the states created the federal government. The federal government didn't create the states. And that is the relationship. So much of this history is ignored. You know, we spend so much time studying other things in our schools, especially when it comes to Western civilization and American history, that I don't think people fully understand the greatness of the concept of the United States of America. I know Donald Trump does. I've specifically talked to him about this when I was in the cabinet. And I know that when he's reelected, that some of this, these insane ideas like defunding the police, among so many others, will go in the trash bin of American history as failed ideas of the left.
Yeah, I think you made a lot of great points in what you just said, but I think a key one that more people really need to either first learn about or remember is that the states created the federal government, not the other way around. And I think that gets lost on a lot of people. And I think that's exactly why so many people have been drawn to President Trump, because, you know, he recognized what a behemoth the federal government has become and how it interferes with so many people's individual lives. So let's talk about yet another item that a lot of Democrats seem to feel represents white supremacy, and that is, of course, the American flag. And so let's go back in time for just 1 year and remember that last year at just exactly this time, Nike had some sneakers out that had Betsy Ross's flag on it, you know, the famous first version of the American flag with the 13 stars arranged in a circle there. And as you may recall, some high-profile Democrats didn't like that one either. Let's take a look.
Before I let you go, I want to talk about, we're all getting ready for 4th of July celebrations. You might have seen in the news that Nike sort of backtracked on a decision that they made. They released some sneakers that had the flag on the very back with the 13 stars, right?
That's right, the Betsy
Ross flag. And then they became concerned. They got some complaints from Colin Kaepernick, who said, hey, that's being associated with some unsavory characters, perhaps, you know, the white supremacists and so on and so forth. And they reversed course. I want to get your take on that, because we're living in a time where there's a different type of sensitivity and sensibility about race.
Yeah, well, you know, and I was glad to see that. And my hope is that they didn't just do it to do it, that they understand the significance there.
At a time that we seek to repair the damage done following the legacy of slavery and segregation and Jim Crow and suppression. I think it's really important to take into account the impression that kind of symbol would have for many of our fellow Americans. And so respect the decision that Nike made.
Well, there's Julian Castro and Beto O'Rourke, two men who ran for the Democratic nomination for president this year, dropped out and were not successful, thankfully, and now are endorsing Joe Biden, helping him raise money and campaigning with him and all of that. So what does it say, again, about the Democrat Party and Joe Biden that, again, none of them as a group will stand up against these moronic ideas that somehow the American flag is offensive? Mike, start with you again.
I mean, it shows that many of these Democrats hate America as we know it. They want to change America as we know it. They want to transform this country into their, socialist dream and throw due process out the door, throw our traditions out the door, throw our Constitution out the door. We just elected an African American president twice, and this country has come a long way on race relations. Are we perfect? No, but who's better? It seems to me that with President Trump, he wants to put America first. With Democrats, they want to blame America first on everything. And it's, again, I say to the Democrats, what country's better? What country's better than America?
That's an excellent question. I think they would be a long time in answering that if they actually gave it some thought truthfully. Matt, you made a point just a couple of minutes ago about how, with these runaway, if the Democrats had their way and the courts were running away with these crazy liberal ideas, that you could envision a future where you wouldn't be allowed to fly the American flag. We'd see the protests against the Betsy Ross flag on Nike sneakers. That idea is not too far-fetched. If Joe Biden gets in there, judges can make those rulings. People are afraid to, stand up to somebody who's coming for their sneakers. Why would they not come for their flag too?
There's no doubt. And if you think about, the shoes as an example of my point, which is that was deemed to be offensive. The American flag, our first flag, that was deemed to be offensive. I think of two flags that predated our American flag that just remind me of what our founding fathers believed. And that the first is the famous evergreen tree that says appeal to heaven. And, I think about that because we're going to need God's help in continuing this experiment that is the United States of America. And then I think of the Gadsden flag and, how versions of it say unite or die. And I think to some extent, that's where we're at as a country. We need to unite under our shared values, under our shared beliefs in everyone has to make this a better country, and we all need to work together. And that I think that's the core principle, Tim, of American greatness, as Donald Trump has explained it, and as I understand it. And that is that we have institutions that, quite frankly, are corrupt. Whether it's our higher education system that has been indoctrinating, the next generations, and in their liberal ideology that is offended by Betsy Ross's flag, or whether it's quite frankly the deep state and the federal government. And I think this is where this president, if given another 4 years, has a tremendous opportunity to restore America to the shining city on the hill, that ideal that Ronald Reagan talked about. And obviously, I'm doing everything I can, and I want to make sure that everyone that's watching this does everything they can. Let's all get outside of our comfort zones because we need to do more than we've ever done to win this election in 2020. Because the left is angry, and you see it in the mobs in our streets. The left is angry. They're angry at America. They're angry at the idea of what we stand for as a country. And I think, the time for choosing has never been clearer. The distinction has never been clearer. And Donald Trump is the person that can lead us to the next level and into the next, decade.
Certainly he is. And as is the case with most things, you don't have to spend too much time wondering what Donald Trump's opinion is when it comes to the American flag. Let's hear from our great president.
This wonderful flag will be preserved forever and ever in American history, as it should be. It will always be a reminder of the supreme sacrifice of our warriors.
We believe that children should be taught to love our country, honor our history, and always respect our great American flag. And we will live by the words of our national motto, "In God we trust."
And there's the president, leaving no doubt exactly where he stands on the issue of the American flag. And before we move on and hear from the president from Mount Rushmore the other day, I think we are all in agreement here that it's the American flag is a great symbol of this country, the freedoms that it represents, and how it is a beacon of hope to the rest of the world. And the great experiment here in America is still going on and is still being successful and giving people chances to pursue their own dreams and live their own lives. But as we see the woke mobs and the toppling of statues and the opposition to people being able to express patriotism, people can't wear sneakers now that has the Betsy Ross flag on it. And as you said, Matt, I think it's not a far-fetched idea to think that people could stop the display of American flags. There's a whole generation of children that are just coming up now. And, is this going to be a country where people are going to be told to be either ashamed of displaying the American flag and showing pride in it, or actually prevented from doing so? And again, Mike, we'll start with you again. This truly is not a far-fetched idea. And this is the cancel culture, the woke culture, trying to tell people what they are allowed to think and how they are allowed to show what their beliefs are.
It kind of reminds me back in 2018 when we were going through the Kavanaugh fight. The Democrats couldn't just stick with Christine Blasey Ford, who was not telling the truth, but she came across credibly to the American people. They had to bring in Michael Avenatti and his lying client, Julie Swetnick, and they brought in, 6 different allegations. Democrats just couldn't help themselves. Fast forward 2 years, they couldn't just stick with George Floyd, a very sympathetic case, a horrific tragedy, what happened to him. They have to go after the Lincoln statues. They have to go after the American flag. The Democrats just can't help themselves because they can't keep their crazy mobs in check. And that's going to be the problem with the President Biden. He is too old. He's too out of it. He's not going to be able to keep the crazy elements of his party in check, like any adult would in the Oval Office. And so these woke mobs will run rampant, and they'll control the Democrat Party. And if Biden is the president, we're going to have a Democrat Senate. We're going to have a Democrat House. They'll pack the Supreme Courts. They're going to add D.C. as a state, and they will be unstoppable because they'll nuke the legislative filibuster in the Senate, lowering the vote threshold from 60 to 51 votes, and we will not be able to stop them. With all the woke stuff, they're gonna defunding the police. It's just never ending, and it's crazy. I mean, look at the difference. The Democrat Party is being overtaken by elements who hate America as we know it. They want to tear down our statues, Lincoln statues. They want to they want to get rid of our American flag. It just never ends with their craziness.
Yeah, and this is, I think you can sense the Democrats who might be watching this show saying, "Oh, come on, you guys are just trying guilt by association." That's not all those people you're talking about. That's not actually Joe Biden. But Joe Biden has a record of being unable to stand up to the extremists in his party. And again, Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez is one of his policy advisors within his campaign. And she said very clearly, when we say defund the police, we mean defund the police. And so there is not one chance in a million that Joe Biden would be able to stand up to the extremists in his party because he needs them. He needs them in order to be elected. And so, Matt, that's what we're heading for, really, is what this election really is about. It's the choice between President Trump and his great record of defending our freedoms versus Joe Biden, who would get steamrolled by all these leftist radical extremists. I mean, isn't it that simple?
I think that frames it very well, Tim. And I can forecast a pretty clear vision of what's going to happen when if Joe Biden becomes president, and that is that these cities that are defunding the police will follow through on that promise, because again, they're leftists. Minneapolis, for example, New York City, controlled for decades by Democrats. People that can afford to will move, that want police protection, that want well-funded police that respond in minutes to a 911 call. Moms that are home with their children, that's home is suddenly broken into, are obviously going to want to live somewhere where the police will respond to a call. And so people that can move will, and the people that can't move will be trapped in failing cities whose economic base has been hollowed out and whose police have been defunded. And you will see, really kind of a dystopian world in the United States where these major cities will be shells of what they used to be, that folks that can't afford are stuck there, and with failing schools and a failing economy, and the states that, like Florida, Texas, and other places that fund the police, that are well run with governors and legislatures that do the right thing as it relates to law and order, they will be the beneficiary of a lot of this movement. And that's the great thing about America and its design. These states are open to be laboratories of innovation. Places like Florida and Texas that do it right are rewarded with more people and more prosperity, and places that do it wrong, like Minneapolis and New York, are going to continue to see decay. And unfortunately for their citizens who can't afford to move, they're going to be trapped in a dystopian world.
Yeah, I want to make one other point there about the defunding the police. And so the AOCs of the world, and Bill de Blasio and all the mayors and members of Congress who support this effort to defund the police. So if they are actually successful in that, if you call 911, there won't be any police to come respond. And so the people at home who are in whatever trouble that they're in will be on their own. At the same time, the Democrats certainly don't want those potential victims having access to their Second Amendment rights either. So not only will the police not be able to be there to protect them, they won't be able to protect themselves because their guns would have been taken away from them at the same time. So, I mean, really just an incredible track that the Democrats are on, and President Trump is the only one who can stop it. And speaking of President Trump, before we go, we do want to hear from him at the great celebration that he had at Mount Rushmore on Friday. Here, once again, is the President of the United States.
Centuries from now, our legacy will be the cities we built, the champions we forged, the good that we did, and the monuments we created to inspire us all. My fellow citizens, America's destiny is in our sights. America's heroes are embedded in our hearts. America's future is in our hands. And ladies and gentlemen, the best is yet to come. This has been a great honor for the First Lady and myself to be with you. I love your state. I love this country. I'd like to wish everybody a very happy 4th of July. To all, God bless you. God bless your families. God bless our great military. And God bless America. Thank you very much.
And there is the great President of the United States, a patriot first and foremost. He loves this country, and every single decision he makes is with what's good for America first in his mind. Final thoughts. Let's start with you, Mike. What's at stake here in November?
Well, I think what we see with President Trump is his leadership. Just like any other human being, we're humans. We're not perfect. But this is a man who cares deeply about his country. He doesn't need the fame. He doesn't need the fortune. He has a better airplane. He has a better helicopter. He has a better house. He doesn't need this job. And he's doing this because he loves this country. And we see that. We just saw that in that speech. And we see that every day. He's fighting for everyday Americans. And he's fighting against these woke mobs who want to destroy America as we know it. They want to defund the police. They want to pack the courts. The courts are our last line of defense against these woke mobs that are coming for us. And President Trump is going to be in there fighting for everyday Americans every day. And that, with the President Biden, he's old, and as is pretty obvious by watching him. Anytime he's on TV, he's not all there, and he's going to be controlled by these woke mobs, these left-wing radicals, and he'll be their puppet. President Trump's going to stand up for us, and President Biden is going to be bowing to mobs, and that's what is at stake in this election.
Final thoughts, Matt?
Yeah, I think, as I mentioned before, this election presents a clear choice and a clear, really, opportunity to head in the right direction. A country of patriots, a country of small business owners, first responders, a country that values law enforcement, frontline workers. That it is so clear to me what President Trump offers and the vision he is offering, and quite frankly, the vision that Republicans offer. And at the same time, the vision the left offers is right in front of us. It is statues indiscriminately, whether it's George Washington, whether it's Ulysses S. Grant, whether it's Abraham Lincoln, whether it's Mount Rushmore, those being pulled down, history being washed of really kind of the what makes it history, how we learn from history. The famous saying that those that don't appreciate history are doomed to repeat it is very clear to me. And the left, with their mobs and their burning and looting and everything, that's Joe Biden's America. That's what he offers, and that's what he will bring. And so we should expect that if we don't do everything we can do, and more than we've probably ever done for an election to get Donald Trump elected to a second term, that it's a very stark world, and our country will never be the same. Joe Biden wants to fundamentally change America for the worse. Donald Trump has been working every day to restore American greatness and maintain American greatness. And one comment on this economy, Tim. We saw with this jobs report in June, 5 million jobs, 4.8 million jobs created. This president did it once with the greatest economy our country has ever seen. He will do it again when he's reelected.
I think there's no question. We already see the evidence of that. And, you bring up the jobs report, 4.8 million jobs created in June, which is a 1 month record. It's the largest month of job creation in the history of this country. And the record that it broke was set in the previous month, in May. 2.8 million jobs, 2.7 million jobs, I should say, created in the month of May. At the time, that was a record, and now June is the record. And so the Great American Comeback is already underway. And one last thought about Mount Rushmore. It occurs to me that the only thing that is saving Mount Rushmore itself from the woke mobs is the fact that it's a mountain, and they can't get up there and just knock it down. So I guess we're all fortunate in that it is as large as it is. So that's all the time we have today. I want to thank our viewers for being with us, and also our two fantastic guests, the former acting Attorney General of the United States, Matt Whitaker. Great to be with you again, Matt. Thank you.
Thank you. Appreciate it, Tim.
And the founder and president of the Article 3 Project and former chief counsel for nominations of the Senate Judiciary Committee, Mike Davis. Mike, thank you very much.
Thanks for having me, Tom.
And we want to thank all of our viewers and invite them to come back next week for another edition of War Room Weekly here on Team Trump Online. And before you go, I want to remind you also to please download the official Trump 2020 app to your smartphone. It allows you to get the straight news right from the campaign, right from the president. You can get involved, you can donate money, you can volunteer, and you can even make phone calls to other voters from the comfort of your own couch. So download the app. You earn points for doing all those things, and you can trade those points in for great prizes up to and including a picture of yourself with President Trump. So download the app today. It's available in all of the app stores, and join all your friends and get them to download it too. So we would appreciate that. Thank you very much for watching. Until next week, I'm Tim Murtaugh with the Trump Campaign.
We choose truth over facts.
A composite that our sketch artists put together after interviewing Biden event attendees is unveiled.